Okay, in this vodcast, what we're going to do is a brief introduction to the periodic table. In a later unit, we're going to go through a lot more subtleties and properties of the periodic table and more of what you can get out of the periodic table. But for this, what we want to do is identify the sections of the periodic table so we can use it to write formulas and give the names of formulas. To do that, there are some certain rules about the periodic table that you need to know. First of all, let's just go through the structure of the periodic table. Everyone who is watching this vodcast has seen a picture of the periodic table, and I'm certain that everyone knows what it represents, or all the elements in the known universe. We'll talk about later if there will be more elements added and that sort of thing, but for right now it represents all of the known elements that are in the universe. In other words, everything that is made up of matter can be made up of the roughly 115, 118 elements that are listed on the periodic table. Alright, let's just go through the different sections that you need to know, and let's start with the big part of the periodic table. You're going to see a diagonal line going down through the periodic table. This is going to separate the metals from the nonmetals. And this is very important. So when I say, well, is magnesium a metal or a nonmetal, it's to the left of the line, so it's a metal. If I said, is nitrogen a metal or a nonmetal, you're going to say that it's a nonmetal because it's to the right of the line. Now, for our purposes here, we're going to use the line as the designation. In other words, if I said silicone, right now you're going to call silicone a nonmetal. We'll talk about metalloids a little bit later, but for right now we're just going to refer to it as a nonmetal. So anything left of the line is a metal, anything right of the line is a nonmetal. Alright, let's identify the columns, or what we refer to as groups or families. So that would be group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. up to 18. Now with the old naming system, you can see it's written 1A, 2A, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. You're going to hear me refer to it mostly as group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that's for a reason. And again, those reasons we'll talk about a little bit later. However, if I say group 5 right here, and usually we'll be pointing at it or something, so it should be clear to understand, you need to realize we could be talking about group 5 or group 5. But again, as we move through the course, that will be pretty clear. Anyway, the first group we refer to as the alkali metals, and that's spelled A-L-K-A-L-I, the alkali metals. That's group 1. Group 2 are the alkaline earth metals. So just to make that spelling a little bit better, we call those the alkaline earth metals. This section here we call the transition metals. And then we have our carbon group, our nitrogen group, our oxygen group, and then we have the halogens. The halogens are typically fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. Typically when we talk about the halogens, we're talking about those 4 elements. And then on the end, on the right, we have the noble gases. Okay, when we talk about the horizontal rows, in other words, that row, that row, that row, etc., 1, 2, 3, 4, we call those periods. Those are going to represent energy levels when we talk about the structure of the atom. But again, we'll get to that later also. So we've got groups going up and down, periods going horizontally, the alkali metals, the alkaline earth metals, the transition metals, the halogens, the noble gases. This section down here we're going to refer to as the inner transition metals, and they're referred to as the lanthanide group and the actinide group. We'll use this section sparingly throughout the year. Alright, so what you should know is the basic structure of the periodic table, the names of the identified groups or families, and how to be able to tell if it's a metal or a nonmetal. The other thing that we want to add to this periodic table are charges. Now we're going to go over how these charges are derived a little bit later, but for right now, everything in group 1 has a +1 charge. So if I say what's the charge on sodium, you're going to say sodium would have a +1 charge. And again, we'll talk about why this is the case a little bit later. Everything in this column will be +2. Everything in this column will be +3. We're going to skip that column. -3 for that column, -2, and -1. And we're going to skip that column also. So if I said, what's the charge on sulfur? It's in the -2 column, so we would say -2. If I said, what's the charge on aluminum? It's in the +3 column, so we say +3. What's the charge on calcium? There it is, +2. Now you'll see me write it usually 2+. And again, we'll talk about those subtleties a little bit later also. But you can write it 2+ or +2. Typically, you write the number first and then the sign second. So again, the order of the columns goes +1, +2, +3. Skip the carbon column, -3, -2, -1. And then the last column won't have a charge. Okay, again, this is a very brief introduction to the periodic table. Know the names of the columns, know the sections, metals, nonmetals, and know the charges. The charges are very, very important. So as you move on to the next couple of lessons where you talk about writing formulas, you need to know those charges. Also, you should always have a periodic table present with you while you're doing the work in this course, because you'll refer to many things on this periodic table as we move through. Okay, until the next vodcast, that's it.